I am Daniel Madison. Welcome to Mechanic. It's mechanic and not the mechanic, and I'll explain why. A lot of people who practice the things that I practice the things that we practice, tend to give themselves names. And one thing that people try to do is make themselves different. So you get magicians, you get sleight of hand artists, and then the person that demonstrates gambling techniques, some of them call themselves card cheats or cheating demonstrators or gambling demonstrators. Other people call themselves mechanics. I don't call myself a mechanic, and I don't like to give myself a title, and the only time I ever do is to clarify what I do for a living, how I earn my money, or if I am doing a demonstration, then that's the only time that I'll ever refer to myself as something. And it would usually be deception artist. And that's simply because the art that I practice is within the deceptive practices. I consider a mechanic, a card mechanic, to be somebody who cheats at cards, makes their money from card cheating, and nothing else. That's not what I do, so I don't think it's fair to call myself a mechanic. However, everything that I'm about to show you and teach you came from my background as a card cheat. And even back then, I never referred to myself as anything, and if somebody was to ask me, what do you do for a living? There's no way I would have said, I'm a mechanic, I'm this, I would never have even said I'm a card cheat. All I knew that is I could do something that made me money, and I never thought that that would give me a title. I never thought that it'd give me a name. So even when I used to cheat at cards, I didn't see myself as a card cheat. I just saw myself as Daniel Madison, and this is something that I can do. I used to go play cards, and I had techniques that I knew were wrong, but they allowed me to win card games. They gave me an advantage, but I never gave myself a name. So it's important to point out that this DVD isn't calling me a mechanic, but it's calling the work that I'm doing the mechanics of deception. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I started so that you can see how I got to these moves now and where they came from. So I was a young boy when my parents separated, and that left me to my own devices with nobody to kind of look over me and nobody to see when I was doing wrong things or bad things. And I was pretty bad as a teenager, and when I was 15 years old, I saw this guy on TV, and he was cheating at cards. I was just flicking through the channels, and he was dealing cards from the bottom of the deck, from the middle, from second to top, and it was like a 5-minute piece of TV that I was just flicking through. And that moment changed my life. It changed everything about what I wanted to do, because I knew I wanted to do bad things, but not for the sake of doing bad things or being bad. I just saw things like that as an easy way to make money. So when I saw this guy, it seemed to be an option where I could still continue deception in a safe way, because it was different from going out and stealing cars. Not that I did that, but it was different from the things that my friends were doing and the people that I hung around with. It's different from what the kind of things they were doing, but it was still as deceptive. So for me, it allowed me to be who I felt I was. It allowed me to continue that deception in a safe way, or at least I thought it was a safe way, because it's an invisible art. The art of sleight of hand and the art of mechanics and card cheating, it's invisible. The whole idea is that you never see it, and nobody ever knows that it's happened. So to me, that was a very safe option, and I had this obsession with my hands where I always had to be doing something or fidgeting, and that is what put a deck of cards in my hand. Watching this guy on TV, I was 15 years old, I saw 5 minutes of it, and my life changed like this. I went out and bought a deck of cards, and I started learning from memory what I'd seen on TV. So I put kings to the bottom of the deck, and I spent years practicing without any resources, books, DVDs, or videos. How can I take those cards from the bottom and make them look like they're coming from the top? And I always explain it like this. If you don't know how to drive a car, and somebody gives you a car and a big open space It gives you the keys and you learn how to turn the engine on. You will eventually learn how to drive that car. You don't need to be taught how to do things. You don't need somebody to come along and say, this is how you do this is how you do that. If you're given the tools and you've seen how it works, or you know that cards can be dealt from the bottom, all you have to do is spend time with those playing cards and figure out, how do I get those cards from the bottom? Not how does somebody teach me how to get those cards from the bottom, but how do I do it? And if you spend a long time thinking like that, you end up picking things up. And until I got to about 19 years old, maybe even 20, from starting at 15, thinking that all these moves that I'd come up with were my own. Not bottom dealing, I knew that existed. Not center dealing because I'd seen the guy on TV do it, but from the dealing, I developed all kinds of different techniques for sleight of hand and deception. And I thought that every one of those things belonged to me. So it was quite annoying to find a book called The Expert at the Card Table, and it contained all these moves that I was doing, and I thought I'd been ripped off until I saw the date, 1902, quite a long time before I was even born. And I kind of discovered that anybody who takes a deck of playing cards and starts to learn these things, they're all going to come up with the same things. Because there's only so many things that you can do with a deck of playing cards, especially when it comes to dealing, because there's only one action of dealing playing cards. And the way I thought back then was, how deceptive can I be with this action? Not can I take a card from the middle, can I take a card from the bottom or somewhere else, but what can I do with this movement? So it was more about me and the movements than the sleight of hand. So I saw this guy on TV, and I didn't know at the time, but it was Steve Forte. I found that out when I was about 20, 21 years old, because I saw that 5 minutes and I never saw that footage again. And I did search for it, and I did look around, and I found it when I was 21. And yeah, so that's when I was introduced to Steve Forte. But back then it was just 5 minutes of an unknown person. So from there, I learned how to cheat at cards. At home, in my bedroom, anywhere I went, I had a deck of cards, and I was always thinking, what can I do with this deck of cards? And it got to a point where I thought, I need to learn how to play cards before I learn how to cheat. But what I did is I learned those two things at the same time. So I went to card games and learned how to play cards. I learned how to play poker. I also learned what I could and could not get away with just by watching. I didn't try anything. I just watched where all the angles were. I knew that there was a table in front of me, so everything below that table was a blind. I knew that what this guy could see because I could see him. So I watched the guy to my left, and by doing that meant I had the eyes of the guys on my right and vice versa. So I kind of knew the angles that he was sat at, and I could see what was hidden from my point of view of this guy. So that meant it's kind of a mirror image. I then knew what he could see when he was watching me. So I kind of worked by learning how to play cards. I learned by being at card tables, playing card games, and thinking, what can I do with this action? When the deck's put there and moved there, can I do something? If the deck's cut over there and I have to collect the cards, can I do something then? When the cards are dealt to me, what can I do? So I never learned as a way of performing, and it was never a performance because it was hidden, and everything was about hiding everything. So the things you're going to see in this DVD, you're not going to see many performances. You're going to see the moves, and you're going to see me explaining the moves, but you're not going to see people reacting. You're not going to see me performing or getting people to clap. This is about exposing the things that I learned back then. So after I'd learned how to cheat and started learning how to play poker and became good at that, I got to a level of confidence where I could enter real games. And I was 17 years old, and I started to look for games and build relationships with people that led me into card games. And I started to do it. I started to cheat at cards, but I did it in a way that didn't benefit me. I'd do all the moves, I'd steal cards from the deck, and I'd do deceptive moves, but not for my benefit, just so that I could do them, just so that I could figure out, can I do this or not? And the more I tried it and the more I got away with things, I realized I can do this for real. So I started doing it for real, and eventually when I was 18 years old, I made a very silly mistake. I got a bit too cocky, and a bold move went wrong, and I got caught cheating, and it was cheating against the wrong guys, and I was a young guy, and Basically, a long story short, I almost lost my life from what I did. So when I recovered from that, I was a very paranoid person, thinking that these guys are going to come and finish the job that they tried to, well, finish what they started. So I hid for like maybe a year. I just locked myself away, but I didn't give up the playing cards. I couldn't stay away from playing cards. I was obsessed. So I still carried on my practices, and it was my cousin, and she saw me practicing, and she said, "Where did you learn magic? I didn't know you were a magician." And I'm like, this isn't magic. It's, you know, I'm just practicing some card moves, and it put that idea in my head that this is a better way to make a living, because I knew all the sleight of hand, I knew all the techniques, I knew all the moves. I just had to figure out how to turn those moves into something that, instead of it being hidden, into a way of presenting something that would impress somebody, that would make somebody look at it and go, wow, that's amazing. So at the start I thought, this is just going to be an exposure of my work, because that's impressive enough. But nobody wanted to see that, so I became a magician, and I became a magician by accident. And I didn't last long as a magician, because my heart was in the art of keeping it secret and keeping it hidden. So I'm not going to tell you about my magic history and what happened from that point on. This DVD is not about that. This project is about going back to those years when I was learning, and how I learned these things, and the things that I learned and used at card tables and card games. Some of the things I never took to card tables, but all of those things came around and I came up with during those years where I was developing moves for a card table. So this is Mechanic. When it comes to deception with dealing playing cards, you've got to start right at the beginning, which is fair dealing. So you have to learn how to deal normally before you learn any of the false deals or any of the deceptions that you're going to learn. So we're going to start by looking at fair dealing. And although you don't think it's important to learn how to fair deal, when it comes to dealing from the bottom of the deck or the middle of the deck, or Greek dealing from the 51st position or second from the bottom of the deck, any kind of false deal is very important. In fact, it's vital that you learn how to fair deal in the same grip that you're going to apply to all the other kind of dealing. So the grip that you're going to apply to the bottom deal has to be the same as the grip that you use for the second deal, the Greek deal, the center deal, any kind of deal have all got to look the same. And the best way to do this is to learn the fair deal correctly right from the start, get used to the grip. And I know that people, or anybody who's ever handled a deck of playing cards, everybody knows how to deal playing cards, but you have to relearn, you have to start again with a new fair deal, so that the grip when you fair deal playing cards, and when I say fair deal, I mean just deal normally from the top of the deck. So you have to learn a new grip, a new technique of dealing playing cards. And although it's a fair deal and you think that maybe not much effort needs to be put into this, it is crucial that the fair deal is correct, it's in the correct grip. Because if it's not, when it comes to the second deal, or the center deal, or the bottom deal, you're going to want to change the grip, because you kind of, you develop patterns, and you develop things that you like to do to make those deals easier. And no kind of deceptive dealing is about being made easier. A lot of people, especially when it comes to our industry and use of playing cards, like to take things like a bottom deal and find a way of making it easier so that it feels easier, so that the playing card comes out easier. And most people forget that to do that, you're sacrificing the grip. And what I mean by this, I've seen a lot of people and a lot of experts go from a second deal to a center deal to a bottom deal, and on each 3 deals, the grip changes. And it's these kind of people that you can tell have learned from the wrong places. And by saying the wrong places, I don't mean that's not supposed to be an insult or offend anybody in the magic industry, but that is magicians who have taught those different techniques. So if you learn one technique from one magician and he says hold it like this, so you learn a bottom deal from one person who's well known for his bottom deal, and then you learn a Greek deal from someone else, you're going to come across different grips. And that's why there are so many different grips in the industry. And the reason for that is that their grips that they're teaching is what's best for their hands. So you have to find the fair deal that works best for your hands. So before we get into any kind of deceptive dealing, we're going to start with the fair deal. I'm going to teach you the way that I do it. And I'm not saying that this is right. I'm not saying it's the way that you should do it. So I'm going to try and teach you in a way that kind of makes you find your own grip. But don't just stick to the fair deal when I teach it, and don't just kind of pause after I teach the fair deal and then master that and then go into the bottom deal and the second deal. It's important that you watch them all together, because you have to practice them all together to find that fair deal and to find the right grip. I kind of arrogantly call mine the Madison grip, and that proves an important point because it's my grip. I mean, this is my hand. Everybody's hands are different, and I call it the Madison grip because it's unique to me. And the grip that you find is going to be your grip. It's not going to be anybody else's. Although all the dealing grips are quite similar because our hands are all the same shape, they're all different sizes, and some people have got long fingers, some people have got short fingers. So you have to find what's good for you, not what someone's teaching you. So when you read and when you learn from people who are teaching in the industry and books and DVDs, and you learn like a straddle grip, you might find that your hand's too small for a straddle grip. Or if you're learning the Erdnase grip, you might find that maybe your thumb doesn't reach over as much as it needs to hold the deck of cards that way. So you don't have to take it as, like, it's not Bible that you have to hold the deck like this, but it is very important that you find out what that grip is before you get good at bottom dealing, second dealing, any kind of dealing. So before we get into all those moves, this is the fair deal. And I'm going to teach you my grip first so that you can make it your own. This is fair dealing. So before we get to any deceptions or any dealing, you need to know how you're going to hold the deck, because the grip of the deck is not going to change. And to show you my grip, I'll first just hold the deck. Looks like a normal dealing grip. But to demonstrate where each finger is and why each finger is in that position, I'm going to use a glass block, same size as a deck of cards, so that you can see where each finger is. And the most important thing to note about this is that the deck is covering my fingers more than my palm. And one thing that most people learn when they're learning how to deal or just hold the deck of cards is that the cards go in the palm. So it feels like a safety position. It feels like that is where they're most safe. That's where all the hands or all the fingers can grip that deck into the hand. But for dealing, to get the better control from the fingers, which are going to be used for the bottom deal, for the Greek deal, and for all other kinds of deceptions, the deck needs to be at the fingertips. This allows you to have a lot more control with the thumb, and it also does something for the bottom deal and the Greek deal, which I find very important, which we'll get to in a second. But for now, let's just take a look at how I grip the deck of cards. So the deck is placed into the hand over the fingers, diagonally. So the top right corner, as I'm looking at the deck, the top right corner touches the fingertip of finger 2, just here. The bottom left corner is almost directly in the middle of the palm. Now that is where the main grip comes from here. However, a lot of people who teach false deals or certain second deals or bottom deals tell you that the entire deck has to be gripped between finger 2 and the palm. The way that I hold it, if I grip here with a deck of cards between finger 2 and the palm, I can't hold the entire deck because there's not enough room. But there's a good reason for that. And we'll get to that when we get into the dealing. But for now, all you need to know is when you grip the deck, you're only going to be really gripping maybe 5 or 6 cards on the bottom of the deck. And what that does is it forces you to keep this finger 2, almost dead straight. No bends in the knuckle, it's almost dead straight. So finger 1 is lined up directly next to it. There are no gaps. And if you look down at the deck when you're holding it like this, that means that finger 1, there's a little bit more room for finger one to curl over, and this gives you a bit more control over the card slipping around. So the deck is in position, finger one curls over the front like this. This also forces finger two to grip those bottom cards without trying. So you can relax finger two, the deck goes in the hand, and as soon as finger one goes up, it's almost instinct that finger two follows and grips the deck. Now it's not entirely gripped in place at this point, but if I turn the deck over, I've still got a hold of those bottom cards between finger two and the palm. So the deck's here, finger one's curled over. Now, fingers 3 and 4 basically do the same thing. You can see where they are. What feels most natural now is that they curl up the side of the deck, and that's exactly what they do. However, the deck is at the fingertips, so they don't curl over very much, only here, only slightly over the edges. Now, this does a few things, and it helps with so many different deceptions that you're going to learn in this DVD. Mainly, it allows you to have freedom over the playing cards. Your fingers aren't going to get in the way of anything because they don't really have an option. You've kind of pushed them out of the way. The thumb goes directly on top and it lines up with finger two. So if I put this in my hand, the glass block, you can see straight through it. The thumb lines up with finger two. Now, if you take a look at this, all my fingers are basically straight. There's very few curling going on. Finger one's straight apart from at the end, and the same with fingers 3 and 4. There's more of a bend in finger 4, and that's only because it's natural, because that's because of the position in the deck from finger 2 in the palm. Finger 4's got no choice, it has to bend over. And you've got to do what feels natural with the fingers. Now, I'm not saying that you should do this grip, but what I am saying is follow me through the bottom deal, the Greek deal, and the other deals, and you'll see why this grip is important for what I do. So I call this the Madison grip. You'll find your own grip when you're learning this, and that will be called your grip. So look at this again. It's like this. The hand is straight. Put the deck on top like this. Put your thumb on top. Finger 2 is straight, and the rest of the fingers curl slightly over the edges. And the hand is pretty much straight apart from those small bends. So that is what I call my Madison grip. When you learn this for yourself, it will become your grip. So let's take a look at some of the false deals and the fair dealing method that will be dealt from the deck held in this position. So you need to learn all these things together to understand why this grip is so important. So let's first take a look at fair dealing. So you understand how to find your grip, how to find your own grip on the deck. And one of the most important things about this grip, when it comes to false deals especially, is fair dealing. And not a lot of people pay attention to fair dealing. Like when people are learning bottom deals or second deals, Greek deals, center deals, they focus more on the deception rather than what's fair. And the two things separate at that point because the person's mind is more focused on the bad thing that they're doing. So they forget about the fair thing because they think it's just a natural thing that they can do. And because you're changing your grip or you're finding a new grip, this grip has to stay the same throughout everything. Throughout the fair deal, throughout the fake deals, throughout any time you hold a deck of cards, it needs to be in that grip. My one problem with false deals is the change of grip, is when people hold a bottom deal like this and a second deal like this. You can see it just by the way they hold the cards. So that's why it's so important to keep that same grip. And what will force you to keep that same grip is learning and mastering fair dealing. And that sounds silly because dealing cards is just dealing cards as far as anybody's concerned. But the fair deal is even more important than the false deal. And I'll show you why. So a bottom deal comes from the same grip as a center deal comes from, as does the Greek deal. And most people are taking cards off the deck and they're doing it kind of subconsciously, thinking ahead for the bottom deal. And when they get to the bottom deal, then there becomes more attention and there's a change in pattern. And the idea is to merge the two and make the two come together, bring them back together and cause this perfect marriage between what looks real and what's supposed to look real. So if the person learning this doesn't focus enough on the fair dealing, the bottom deal, as good as it gets, or the Greek deal, as good as they get at doing that move, if they've not spent the same amount of time focusing on the fair deal, then they're going to look different no matter how good they are. So you have to focus on fair dealing as much as false dealing, and it probably doesn't sound important, but you don't want to get to a situation where you've built this habit, where you get to a point where you can't go back and you can't focus on your fair dealing because your bottom deal looks so different. So fair dealing to me has to look like bottom dealing, has to look like Greek dealing, has to look like any other kind of deal. And the only way that you can do this is by practicing all of those things together. So don't just focus on one at one time. Don't just stick to the bottom deal and then say, I'm going to learn this for 2 weeks and then I'm going to come back and learn the Greek deal. You have to do bottom deal, Greek deal, whichever deals you want to focus on, you've got to practice them together. And the best way to do this is by doing a normal deal, a second deal, a bottom deal, and a Greek deal, one after the other, the whole way through the deck. That way, that forces all those 4 things to appear the same. If you just focus on consecutive bottom deals, then the bottom deals look like bottom deals. And then if you focus on second deals, it looks different because you're focusing on the move rather than the way you're handling the deck, or rather than the deception you're trying to get away with. So fair dealing is more important than any other kind of dealing. So get good at fair dealing and mix the fair dealing in with every other kind of deal. Let's look at some false deals. So let's take a look at the bottom deal. So this is the bottom deal, or the way that I do the bottom deal. The grip is going to be your own grip, but I'm going to teach it from the grip that I've taught, the grip that I use, that I call the Madison grip. And it's basically the grip that you've just learned with the fingers extended like this, so the fingers are straight. Now this should explain why the fingers are so straight when I'm teaching the bottom deal. So we're going to use the aces at the bottom of the deck to show you what's going on. I'm going to turn them face up. So the deck's in the correct grip. And what happens is, because these 2 fingers are so straight like this, you're going to make the same thing happen with these 2 fingers. Now, the grip causes a natural gap here. So this is where the bottom card has been taken from. And the way I get to this card, I can't just take it from the deck. It's too much hard work and it's too much of a risk, because I have to drag it away, and it causes too much unnecessary noise, and it affects the deck in a way that I don't want the deck affected. And that is where fingers 3 and 4 come in useful. So the deck's here and there's a gap. Fingers 3 and 4 are going to close in like this. So the hand is basically going to close shut, and all fingers are flat. Apart from finger 1's gripped over the edge, the thumb's on top. Now when you're pushing a card over to be dealt fairly, when you go to bottom deal, the thumb does the same thing, but it presses down. So that's where the pressure's coming from. But we'll get to that in a second. So there's pressure on top, and that causes the deck to be gripped between the thumb and finger 2. Finger 1's at the front, just keeping a little bit of control over the cards. So fingers 3 and 4 come up the side like this, the hand closes. And this is where the hard work happens. And it'll take a little bit of time to get used to what's about to happen next. But this is something, like most deceptions, will just come over time and with a lot of practice. Now, finger 3 is doing most of the work. And the grip that I explained earlier, that is between finger 2 and the palm, you can see it's gripped all 4 aces. I didn't intend to do that. That's just the right amount of cards for the hand to grip. So the grip is on the bottom cards between finger 2. The deck is gripped with the thumb. Now this allows finger 3, when it closes, I push finger 3 up against the deck, causing quite a bit of pressure. And then I simply return finger 3 and finger 4 back to their position. So it's a move like this. And also something, not everybody can do this. This is a really weird thing to do, but that's basically what you need to learn how to do. Separate fingers 1 and 2 from 3 and 4, like this. The deck's in there, and that's basically what's going on every time you execute a bottom deal. So the deck is gripped. These 2 fingers move up. There's pressure from finger 3, and when you come back, finger 3 separates that bottom card from finger 2 like this. It takes it back with it. Close, pressure, and then it pulls it back like this. So if I do that for real, I'll pause at the moment where the bottom deal is. At this point, the card's been brought back with finger 3 and 4 at this point. Now I'm going to pause at this point to explain something. The reason I'm doing this is because, and I'll use other people's bottom deals to explain why this is helpful. If you look at most bottom deals, I won't name names or refer to any bottom deals, but if you look at most bottom deals, the bottom card is forced out by the same way by finger 3, but not like this, but like this. So the finger moves back and then pushes that card away from the deck like this. Now, the biggest problem with this is if somebody's looking at this deal from head on, here's what happens. You get this big knuckle flash, and everybody can see this big bend in the finger going underneath the deck. And that's one of the main things that gives away a bottom deal, is the knuckle flash. So by doing this, you eliminate any kind of flashing underneath the deck. So from this, you can't see from head on, but you can see this. And one of the things that taught me about this was the finger tattoo. Because if the knuckle flash isn't bad enough, I've also got a tattoo to tell people this is the bottom deal. So you need to learn this first before you can go and take the card. So if you can't do this, get practicing this. So the deck is gripped. Finger 3 goes up and takes the card like this. Now what's happening before this is you're going to do a fake deal, or what looks like a fake deal, because you're going to push the top card over as if it's going to be taken, like a fair deal. So this is a fair deal, and the same thing's happening on the bottom deal. You push the card over, but at the same time, finger 3 is pulling that bottom card aside like this. Now the nice thing about this is the bottom card pivots out in the same way that the top card does. So the top card actually hides the bottom card. So if you looked at this from the top down, you wouldn't see that card because it lines up directly with the top card. So when you come to take this card, the bottom card's been released from the bottom of the deck. And when you come to take it, you've got this big gap to go in and take it. And also your thumb can pretend to take the top card. It goes on top like this, but you're just going to slide off and pull this back. Just as you would for a fair deal. There's the deal, the thumb comes back, but all you're doing is this. You're bringing that top card right back. The bottom card's pushed out, and when you go to take it, it is finger 2 from the taking hand that grips this card right in the gap. You don't have to reach right in for it, you can just take it right there. And you want it to look like you're taking this card. So when you're doing this, from a psychological point of view, to almost kind of trick yourself, act as if you're going to take this card. And because this card's here, when you go to take it, you'll be stopped because this card's in the way. Then all you got to remember is no pressure on the top from the thumb. Everything's pulled out by finger 2 of this hand, like this. And as it's sliding out, that's when the thumb slides off of this card and connects with the bottom card. At the same time, that's when the card's brought back, like this. The top card is brought back. So the deck is in position, finger 3 moves up, kicks this card out. This is supposed to look like a fair deal, so the card goes over like this, covers this up. Finger 2 goes in, grips the card right on the edge. It doesn't need to go underneath the deck, just on the edge of this card. Thumb goes on top of the top card here. As this card is pulled back, the thumb of this hand is left with no choice but to grip the bottom card and then pull it away from the deck. Now, as you're pulling the card away from the deck, it's going to seem like instinct to open these fingers to allow that card to be released. And this is something you see a lot of bottom dealers do, and it's another thing that gives it away. This happens. The fingers move out of the way so the card can be taken. This is so unnecessary, especially with this kind of grip. The fingers are straight anyway, so they don't need to move much. When you get to this point, the card's already cleared the deck, so there's no reason or need to move those fingers out of the way, because they're not in the way. The card's already away from the deck. All you got to do is pull it. So there's no need for those fingers to move out of the way. The fingers are going to be connected with that card, but the card's just going to slide right away from them. And that's another thing that kind of hides and eliminates the knuckle flash, because the fingers stay exactly where they are. They don't move away from the deck. It is the card that is pulled away from the fingers. Now, once the card's cleared the deck at this point, fingers 3 and 4 might be curled a little bit out too much, but because of the motion of the deal, this is the only discrepancy, and it's the only thing that's kind of hidden in the motion. So let's look at the movements. So the movements of a deal, of a bottom deal, have to look like a fair deal. So because you're trying to find like that marriage between a fair deal and a bottom deal, you have to make the bottom deal look like you need to make the bottom deal look as much like the fair deal as you make the fair deal look like the bottom deal. So you've got to kind of find a balance where they both kind of start to look like the same thing. And the best way I've found to hide any kind of discrepancies is in that natural flow of dealing. And the way I do it is like this. The hands are almost mimicking each other. They're almost mirroring each other. They go down together, they come back up and meet directly in the middle. And if you notice, the deck comes up a bit like this. This is another thing that kind of hides my bottom deal. Most bottom dealers, when they go to take that card, they'll do this to try and hide that card. They'll tilt the deck down this way. There's no need to do that, especially when the hands are in motion, especially when they're moving like this. And another thing that bottom dealers tend to do to try and convince people that oh, I'm not doing a bottom deal, I'm not. To try and convince people, they do things that they don't need to do. So they change things about their body language. Like if you're taking a card from the bottom of the deck, the best way to hide it is by taking it out quickly. You don't need to take it out quickly because the motion hides it. And I'll show you what I mean now. And the speed of the bottom card as well as the fair dealing, at this point is almost doubled without speeding up, because this hand's been taken away. It's almost like an optical illusion. It's almost like a trick of the eye. Because both hands are moving apart at the same speed, it almost looks like double speed. So when I take the bottom card, I do the same thing. I come up. I don't need to worry about hiding this. Let me turn these face down so you can see. I don't need to worry about hiding where the card's coming from, because the eye, when it watches this, is so used to the motion of these hands doing this, that when it comes away, even if I show you the bottom card and I'm taking the bottom card, you won't see a bottom deal, you just see the fair deal because of that motion. So this motion is an important thing that you need to add to your fair deal. You need to get used to doing this. Both hands doing the same thing together. Especially with second dealing, what a lot of people do is they keep this hand as still as possible. And I think that when they learn a second deal, they're doing this to kind of almost prove to everybody how good they are. They're like saying, I'm not good, that I don't need to move the cards, or the cards don't need to appear to move. It's wrong, it makes it look unnatural. There's no dealers I've ever seen in the world, or anyone deal a card from a deck like this. I've never seen this before, apart from in the magic industry. So you've got to get used to looking natural. You've got to get used to appearing like you're just somebody who's picked up a deck of cards and gone to deal. And from what I've seen and from what I've learned in my experiences, this is how people deal cards. And I've taken advantage of that when I'm doing bottom deals, center deals, Greek deals, second deals. And the motion is one of the biggest things that hides everything about this, the bottom deal, the second deal, the center deal. If I do the same thing, the same bottom deal, and keep everything still, you kind of see everything. You see these fingers moving. You can kind of tell that it's not come from here, and you can see the thumb rushing this card back. It's not necessarily rushing it back because it moves at that speed anyway, but because the card is coming back and the hand's dead still, you see it. Whereas in motion, you just don't see that move. So the best way to practice bottom dealing is card from the top, card from the bottom, go the whole way through the deck. And a lot of people tell you when they're teaching bottom deals, just learn with half the deck. Just learn with half because it's easier. You don't want easier. You want it to be difficult. You want to learn things that are difficult, and you don't want to make it. You don't want to make it easy for yourself. You don't want to make a difficult thing to learn easy for yourself, and then build up to it. Because you learn to get good with the easy stuff, and then when you have to make it difficult, you'll have formed habits that prevent you from learning the difficult stuff. So you need to kind of test the water with both feet. You need to go right into the deep end and start with the hardest possible thing. So don't make it easy for yourself by using only half the deck. Take the full deck. So what you want to do is take a card from the top, a card from the bottom, and go the whole way through the deck. Another thing, there's something that Di Vernon once said. He said, there's no reason in the world why anybody would want to do consecutive bottom deals. Completely disagree. And I'll explain why when I get to talking about second dealing. Consecutive bottom dealing, learning how to do this with a few fair deals is excellent practice, and it's excellent exercise for the muscles in your fingers that you've probably never used before. So the practice is that I do usually one from the top, one from the bottom, and mix it up until they both feel the same. I mean, sometimes you'll get hanging cards because you're alternating the cards so much. And when I say hanging cards, I mean when a card is kicked out and it doesn't come away from the deck. And the only reason this happens in practice is because you're taking one from the top and one from the bottom. You would never do that at the card table. You'd probably take maybe 2 or 3 cards from the bottom of the deck in the whole round, so you don't have to worry about taking every alternating card. This is just for practice. So dealing consecutive bottoms teaches you a lot of things. It teaches you the muscles in the fingers, and it also teaches you how to bring this card back properly. So the best practice for this and pushing it out is by just doing consecutive bottoms. And you can see the way that top card's moving as if it's been taken from the deck. So that's the best practice, in my opinion, for the bottom deal. A few things to note. When you're practicing this, pay attention to things that you wouldn't usually pay attention to. And by that, the most important thing I mean is the sound. And this is a problem for so many people who learn bottom dealing. And it's still a problem for me, but it's something that you can't really find a way around, but you can work your hardest to make the sounds match. And when I say sounds match, I'll show you. A fair deal and a bottom deal, they sound different. If you listen, I'll do alternating. I'll do fair deal, bottom deal. I'll start again with that. Fair, bottom. If you listen back to that, it started bad and it got good. And that's the way I practice. You need to start bad so that you know the difference in sound. The top card comes away smoothly, the bottom card kind of gets kicked out and it makes a noise when you kick it out. It makes this noise. It's like a really quiet noise. But you do have to take these things into consideration, especially if you're going to be using this in a quiet environment. Card games aren't usually that quiet of places, but if you're not prepared for that kind of problem that could turn up, it could be something that kind of does you in and catches you out. So you have to take these things into consideration. So first of all, there's the noise of kicking that card out, this noise. Unfortunately, you can't really get rid of that. The best way to silence it or make it more quieter is a softer grip from finger 3 when you're releasing the card. So it almost glides away from the deck rather than being pushed. So to make that move silent, you just need to be softer with your hands. You don't need to have a ninja grip on the deck. You just got to let that card follow finger 3 away from the deck. There's no grip needed. You don't have to pressure with too much pressure. As soon as you feel it release, you can let go and it will just follow your card out. So that eliminates that sound. So that eliminates the first sound of the kick. The second sound is the difference between a fair deal and a bottom deal. And simply they make different noises simply because they're being taken from different parts of the deck and also in different manners. So the top card comes away kind of like this. It comes straight up from the deck. The bottom card, you've got to pull it up through the deck. So obviously they're going to make different noises. And I'm exaggerating the move right now as I take the card in the same direction. But that noise is always going to be there. So you have to find a way to take the card away from the deck first and then drop it. And the idea is you're not going to pull it up through the deck Although this is a good thing that I'll get to in a second, you're not going to pull it up through the deck, but you are going to take it way sideways and then up. So it's like a motion like this. It like arcs its way up like this, and it kind of eliminates the sound. And also, when you take that card from the deck is being pulled away from the card as much as the card is being pulled away from the deck. So you have to make those two things work together. Now, when you get this noise, it's usually because the deck is being tilted too much down like this, and it causes this kind of snapping noise. If you change that and allow the deck to remain straight like this, it makes such a softer noise. And when you're practicing, the way that I practice to kind of make those noises match is just by alternating and finding the sound difference, finding where it's coming from. And by doing this, by taking the card from the deck like this, and then trying it like this, and just learning what noises each card makes as it comes away. That's different to this. Even by the slightest pitch, you can hear that difference. Top card from the back, top card from the front. They all make different sounds, and you've got to go through these things. You've got to go through these different ways of taking cards from the deck to find out what sounds best and what sounds quietest. And you probably listen to this thinking, you know, why does this matter? It's not going to make a difference to sound. No one's going to be listening, and no one's going to hear, oh, I just heard a bottom deal. You're wrong. I mean, you can hear a bottom deal, especially if, I mean, you've got to imagine that you're going to be using these moves across from somebody who's as good as you or as knowledgeable as you are. And if I was sat across from somebody who's dealing cards, I'm listening for stuff, I'm looking for stuff, even in my peripheral vision, but hearing and the sounds that decks make, it's usually something that gets overlooked. So that's all I've got to say on the bottom deal. Let's take a look at some more false deals. So this is the Greek deal. So this is the Greek deal. If you get good at the bottom deal, this should be very easy. I even find it easier than the bottom deal itself, and I'll explain why. So the same thing is happening. You're taking 4 cards from the bottom of the deck, but there's a card in the way. How do you get that card in the way? How do you get to the aces? It sounds and it looks more difficult than what it actually is. And it's all, for me, this is my method. I'm not teaching what other people teach. This is the way that I do it, the way that I find it easiest. For me, it's about the way the deck is placed in the hand. Now, the bottom card has to move out of the way. And it doesn't come this way, so there's a gap here. It goes the opposite way. It comes this way away from the deck. So if you remember the grip is here. I go slightly off. And when I say slightly off, I mean by millimeters. And I'll show you the brief that I leave. So this is the grip that I keep. I hold the deck here. And as I'm putting the deck in my hand, I slide over a little bit, exposing that bottom card here. That's more than enough, this brief right here. It's more than enough. That now means I can get to those aces. And it looks more impossible and more difficult and maybe more impressive than it actually is. Because if you look at the other side of this, you can kind of see those aces just here. And that is where you're taking the aces from. And it looks difficult. It looks like, how the hell can you get to those cards? But when you actually practice this and try this, you figure out it's quite easy. And I'll explain why it gets easier as well. So the first part is putting the deck. Get used to your grip, get used to the grip that you're going to use. Shift the deck over a little bit as if it's pivoting from there, so it goes on a pivot like this. Obviously, that's an exaggeration. You go over the tiniest bit and then come back. So I leave the card hanging out like this. And that's more than enough, but I'm doing this just to explain to you how to get to those cards. That's more than enough. The deck is held in the exact same grip apart from this. It's the only card that's out of place. And because finger 1's here and finger 2's got a good grip on the bottom cards, this card is not going to move. It's going to stay exactly where it is. So now you've got to do a bottom deal without taking the bottom card. And what makes this easier is that you have this gap to play with. So finger 3 is going to do exactly the same thing. It's going to come up and add pressure, but it's not going to add pressure to this or anywhere here, just on the edge of the deck. Now, what's interesting is when you try this, let me just get that brief. When you try this and you press up with finger 3, you cause that card to be released just like a bottom deal. And you have to press up against the edge of the deck like this, rather than up to the edge. And what happens is, as soon as that card releases, there's no grip on that card whatsoever from anywhere, because it's sandwiched between the bottom card and the bottom card of the deck, or the third card up from the deck. So that means it's got two cards to slide against. It's got a card above it and a card below it, and the card just slides out really easy, just like this. So when this card's pulled over, the bottom card's pulled over a little bit, nobody's going to see this, or it doesn't get seen because of the thumb. The thumb's in the way at this point, and then when the thumb goes over the top, nobody can see this angle because the rest of the deck is kind of shadowing it, and the motion hides everything as well. I mean, when you're doing this and when you look down from your point of view, you will see that card sticking out. There's no way of hiding that unless you start trying to manipulate the deck, which is unnecessary. And some people teach that you should move the deck back like this and then forward, and that completely hides it. But there's no way that you'd get in position and then hide it and then do this and say, look, because it's like, why are you doing that? I can see it there, but there's no reason to show people what I can see. There's no reason to say, look, this is what I can see. It's kind of hidden completely by the finger. The card is kind of exposed on top of the finger, but because of the way I hold the deck, nobody's ever going to see this. So finger 3 does exactly the same thing as the bottom deal, comes up, adds pressure, and as soon as that card releases from finger 2, it moves aside and it becomes a bottom deal. So it's almost exactly the same as a bottom deal, apart from this first action. And the cards are taken exactly the same as a bottom deal, and you'll come across the same problems and same challenges with sounds as you're going to confront with the fair deal and the bottom deal. The best way to practice this one is mixing it up with the bottom deal and the fair deal, because you can still do bottom deals and Greek deals because you get this grip from the beginning. You can now do Greek deal, top deal, fair deal. Now the good thing about this grip for the Greek deal, you can do it while you're dealing, so you don't need to get into it straight away. So while I'm dealing, I can kind of shift that card out of the way a little bit by gripping finger 1 up and inwards like this, and it pulls that card away. And this is something that's a small movement. It's hidden in the motion of doing this. It's hidden in this action. So the finger curls in and up and it pulls that bottom card away, which means I can then get to the card below it. So that is the Greek deal. This is the second deal. So this is the second deal. I'm not a second dealer. I don't second deal. I learned how to do it when I was learning card moves, but I've never really used it since. However, I'm going to give you a few tips on it. I'm not an expert at this move, and I don't claim to be any good at it, but I do claim to know what's wrong with it and what's wrong with the people who have learned this from the wrong places. The number one problem with the second deal is that most people think that you have to close the brief. And what I mean by that, the cards that you're going to take are coming from underneath the top card. That is what a second deal is. The first card stays where it is, and the rest of the cards come from beneath that card, which means you can save that top card for yourself. The problem with this is most people try to close the brief. And when I say brief, I mean when you deal a card like this here is the brief. This is where the other card is coming from. So the top card goes over, and the second card comes from here as the top card comes back. This is called a strike second deal. It's the most basic second deal, and it's the only second deal I ever do if I have to do it. If I have to show somebody it, that's what I do. And the number one thing that I teach about this is that you don't need to close that brief. most second dealers try and make the brief as small as possible like this because they think that's more impressive. They think that's a display of skill. It is a display of skill in a certain sense, but it's a display of the wrong skill because nobody deals without pushing the top card over, or at least nobody I've had experiences with or been in card games with. No one takes the card like this. It's always helped by the thumb. So the card's always pushed over to this hand. And closing the brief means that you push it over this much or even smaller this much. And I do believe it's a skill to be able to take this card with that small brief. I don't believe it's the right skill for second dealing. So my tip for this is, or my advice for this, the way that I do this is, because you've got the motion already from learning the other deals, you'll notice that the top of the deck at the moment of taking the card is hidden. So nobody sees the top of the top of the deck anyway. At the most, they see they're directly aligned with it. And this is something that you'll learn from practice and learn from playing in games. When you're doing this motion, look where people's eyes are, and you'll notice that when people are sat around a table, the eye line is almost directly at this point. The cards are either pointing directly away from them so they can't see the top of the deck, or it's pointing towards them. So why try and hide what you're doing if it can't be seen anyway? There's no need to hide it if it's not going to be seen. If you're worried about it being seen, don't do it. That's my best advice, because the reason that you're taking cards illegally from the deck or deceptively from the deck is because you've put them in that position to start with. There's not many ways of knowing what the top card is going to be, or there's not many ways of knowing what the second card is going to be. Because I'm a bottom dealer, all my work puts the cards I need to the bottom of the deck. So there's never been a reason for me to second deal. And when it comes to second dealing, especially in card games, it's so much easier to do consecutive bottom deals. In my opinion, it's so much easier to do consecutive bottom deals than to keep the top card. Because that means when you're doing a second deal, every deal is a danger because you're keeping the top card the whole time the top card is staying there. When you're doing consecutive bottoms, I mean, this is the card that's going to be kept, so this is the key card. This card's going to stay here on every deal. Why put yourself in that much danger? Get this card to the bottom instead of the top, and then do fair deals. Everything's fair apart from the deception, whereas in the second deal, everything's a deception apart from the fair deal. So it doesn't make sense to me, and that's why I never do second deals, and that's why I'm not a fan of second dealing. So my advice is, because that top card's hidden anyway, there's no need to do any hard work to try and hide it. So when I'm demonstrating this for people and exposing it, it looks so silly and so as if you can do that. But the point is the deck's facing this way. So all I'm doing is pushing the card over to deal. The thumb hits this card here, the second card, and takes it away from the deck. And it's the biggest gap. I can make it as big as I like because no one's going to see it, because no one sees the top of the deck. But you do not have to close that gap. You make it as big enough as you can allow your thumb to reach. Too small, you're causing yourself too many problems, and there's no need to do that because the deck's up here when it happens. So you can do it as slow as you like, and I'll show you the 4 aces on top, face down, king on top, face up, and I can do it this slowly, and it makes no difference because you can't see that top card. That top card's hidden every time I take a card from the deck. And that is my only advice and thoughts on second dealing. We're going to take a look at shuffling playing cards, both in the hands and on the table. And the most important thing that I want to express about shuffling cards is when you see people in our industry who have learned how to shuffle, who have learned how to shuffle in the hands and on the table, and especially when it comes to deceptive shuffling, the problem is I've found that those shuffles are all too clean, all too well practiced. And I think that gives the card cheat away, especially at a card table. So if you're going to learn moves that are designed for card table deception, you've got to learn. This is one of the most important lessons that I try and tell everybody, not just in shuffling as well. Do not look that clean and do not look like you can handle cards well. And one of the things that gives you away on that is the way that you shuffle a deck of cards. Because when you're learning a false shuffle, or when you're learning a false in the hand shuffle or a false table shuffle, You learn how to do it as clean as possible. And you do that intentionally because you think from learning from the places that you learned from before, let's say from the industry, specifically magicians, you learn that you have to present it as clean as possible. And you think that this represents you as a person, or should I say performer, because I guess if you've learned those kind of shuffles from that industry, you see yourself as a performer. Shuffling for deceptive practices is a completely different thing. And shuffling is the one thing, the most important thing to me when it comes to card table deceptions. If it looks clean, if it looks like you've practiced shuffling, then there's obviously something strange going on, because no card player goes home and practices his shuffles. Anybody can shuffle, and the most simple shuffles are always the best. And if you can do a good shuffle, no person who ever sat at a card table and played a card game has ever done a perfect shuffle that looks so clean, or a perfect in the hands riffle shuffle that ends without needing to straighten the cards up. So a lot of the shuffles that I'm going to go through, they're going to be messy on purpose, and I'll explain why through each shuffle. But the most important message in that is that you don't want to look like you've been practicing. You just want to be able to shuffle like the guys you're playing with. And this is something that I've learned from actually playing with guys at card tables. Not one card player at a card table that I've ever played at could shuffle cards well. Everybody did the overhand shuffle. Occasionally you'd see a table riffle shuffle, and every shuffle I saw was messy because you don't care about the shuffle. The only reason that you shuffle the cards is to mix them up. So why would it become an art form to a card player? All you got to do is mix those cards up and then start playing. So let's take a look at different kinds of real shuffles and different kinds of false shuffles. So this is the overhand shuffle. This is a false overhand shuffle. In my opinion, this is one of the best false shuffles. It's also one of the easiest. It's a false overhand shuffle. It's a running shuffle, which means the same cards are running through the deck twice, and they get placed back in the original position. So the cards that you see getting shuffled into the deck go exactly back where they began. I will do this slowly so that you can follow and see exactly what's happening. It mimics an overhand shuffle. Most people at card games, most people who shuffle decks do the overhand shuffle, and that is why I think this is the best, or one of the best false shuffles, because it's one that everybody's used to seeing. It's not foreign, and it's something that everybody thinks they can do when they see it because it looks like a real shuffle. So this is what's happening. And for explanations, the deck is in order. So the grip is like this, so the deck is in this hand, and you're simply going to take cards from underneath, and you're going to cut half of the packet like this. You're going to take half of the packet from the bottom and let the top half fall onto the fingers. What happens now is the thumb of the left hand peels off 4 playing cards from the top of this pile. So this is the top card of the deck. It's kicked there, and I peel off 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I throw the rest on top. As I do this, I kick this card back a little bit with the thumb. So it kicks back like this, and I throw this packet on top. This now leaves this. This is where I now come in at the back for another shuffle. So it looks like I'm doing the same thing, but the thumb pulls down on the back like this, and it allows me to take this bottom packet away. Now these 4 cards, when I do 1, 2, 3, 4, and the rest go on top, I've now just repositioned the deck. So the King of Diamonds is on top, the Ace of Spades is on the bottom, and the rest of the deck is in order. So I'll run through that a little bit faster so you can see what's happening. I take the bottom packet, I take 1, 2, 3, 4, that gets kicked back as the rest go on top. And I make it look scruffy on purpose. I make it look messy because it's a messy shuffle. It's not tidy. So there's no question about this being stuck out this far. No one's going to question this, because when I come for the second shuffle, I'm going to square the deck up anyway and tidy up. It looks like I'm tidying up, but I'm actually causing a break. So that card stuck out like this, the thumb pulls down, and the packets separate. I then take this packet and repeat the same thing. Excuse me. I repeat the same thing. So I'm taking 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm now reversing those cards into the original position, exactly where they belong in the deck. The rest gets thrown on top. King, ace, the deck's in order. One more time at real time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it looks like a typical overhand shuffle, but nothing about the deck of cards has changed. And that is a false overhand shuffle. This is the vice shuffle. So the vice shuffle is clearly something that I've never done at a card table or would never try at a card table. But it is something that I came up with whilst practicing and learning moves for the card table. Obviously, because of how fancy and flourishy it looks by the way you're handling each packet, it's not something that you could ever use in that kind of situation. But hopefully it's something that you can take something from. It's an alternative to an in the hands riffle shuffle. And here's how it works. So the deck is in order to begin with. The thumb cuts half the deck like this at the side, pushes it over. The other hand's going to take this and turn it over like this. Finger 2 of each packet then goes underneath and causes pressure as fingers 1 of each hand, finger 1 of each hand pulls down at the corners like this. Finger 1 then lets the cards riffle away just like this. This is a bit of a strange move to get used to, especially if you've never done it before. And what you're going to do is tilt these packets in towards each other like this. And as you're riffling, you're going to let those corners interweave. And it's very important that the packet in the right hand goes first by maybe 2 or 3 cards. So the right hand first, the rest interweave until they're all completely interweaved. Now, at this point, you can push the packets in a little bit more like this to make it look like they're getting pushed more and more towards each other, like a real shuffle's going on. Now, this allows you, with the left hand, finger 1 and the thumb, grip that entire packet in place. Now, the right hand can now come away from the packet and leave it completely free because it's gripped in place. Finger 1 and the thumb. So the hand comes away and goes on top like this. I can now move finger 3 and 4 out of the way at the back of this packet like this
as finger one pushes the top card over. All you need is one card. Sometimes some more cards will follow over like this, but all you need is one card. And as soon as that gap is covered, at the front, I pull these packets apart and they pivot around finger three here. That is covered by the top card. And these packets completely separate. This packet then gets put directly back on top. So once again, this packet goes over. I release first here, allow these packets to interweave, grip like this, so that my hand can be taken away. This hand goes over the top and starts pushing cards over. As it does so, I cause the whole packet to pivot around finger three here. This whole packet pivots underneath the top card and goes back in place. So when you watch it again, it's the pushing in action that makes it look like those two packets are getting interweaved. And also this is the point that sells it more than anything. When you push those two packets that far in, it looks like they're completely the whole way in. And then, so this is the first deception. And now you tilt down slightly to show that you're actually pushing the cards together. And as they look like they're pushing together, it's actually coming away and going underneath. So at real time, and then the deck stays entirely in order. That is the Vice Shuffle. This is a series of false table shuffles. I'll explain each one individually afterwards. So the false shuffle sequence that you've just seen is something that I put together and something that I stick to. I never kind of vary it. I never change my false table shuffle sequence because there's never a need to. You can learn so many false table shuffles. There are about 50, if not more, out there. Why do you need to know that many? You're only going to shuffle cards when it's time to shuffle cards, especially at a card table. Why do you need so many? You don't. There's no point in putting so much focus into all these different kinds of false shuffles. This is just my opinion when you can become good at a certain sequence. Because the only time people are going to see these false shuffles or see what appears to be a real shuffle is when it comes to shuffling the deck. And that happens rarely. And at a card table, you've got to think about the way that someone would normally shuffle a deck at a card table. Another player would shuffle a deck of cards at the card table. And you usually see the riffle shuffle, the cards get riffled together, and there'd be a few cuts. There'd be nothing fancy, there'd be nothing suspicious. And this is why I kind of keep this sequence as it is, because the deck is seen to be cut a few times, and then the deck is seen to be riffle shuffled together, and that gives the impression that the deck is shuffled. There's no need to complicate it. As long as the opponent, as long as the victim, the spectator sees the deck of cards being shuffled, that is all that matters. The reason I turn it into a sequence is because the riffle shuffle together, is not good enough on its own, neither is a cut, because if you cut a deck 3 times, then an order can be kept. So it's good to see that mixed in with a standard table shuffle, or what appears to be a standard table shuffle. So I'm going to go through the things that I did in that demonstration, and it's a very simple thing. The deck is in order. It's in full deck order to begin with, to explain to you that the deck stays in full deck order. Now, bear this in mind. I'm not going to spend time teaching you how to control 4 aces at the bottom of the deck during a shuffle, or 4 aces to the top of the shuffle, because I don't see the point in wasting your time. Once you learn these shuffles, if you can control a full deck, if you can control the order of a full deck, you don't need explaining to how to control the bottom 4 cards or the top 4 cards. It's obvious, it's clear. So if you know how to control the full deck, you control as many cards as you like, as you choose. So let's take a look at the sequence that I just executed. So I start by doing what's called a running cut. Cut the deck 3 times, and the deck stays in order after those 3 cuts. So the deck's in order right now, and what I do is this. I grip the deck at each end like this, finger 2 and the thumb at the back, finger 1 rests on top, and I strip away the bottom packet 1/3 of the deck with the right hand like this. It comes out and it goes back on top. Simple. However, when it goes on top, this thumb, there's extra pressure at the back corner here, so that it leans over. So when I put this packet on top, it doesn't actually connect. There's a break at the back. There's a huge break at the back held by the thumb, which you can see right here. Now that break stays where it is. So that means I can do another cut to the top. I usually do 3, but you can do as many as you want, as long as you're taking from the bottom and putting to the top. That break stays where it is and it doesn't get lost. Cut from the bottom until all the packets have gone from the bottom. When you take the last packet, you put it on top and you allow the deck to fall to the table. And that keeps the deck in brand new deck order, or in the same order as it was. So once again, this goes on top, it doesn't connect because the thumb keeps a break. Again and then again. 1, 2, 3. The thumb keeps a break at the back. 1, 2, 3, and the deck is still in order. That is the running false cut. So what I do, I start with this. I do 1, 2, 3, straighten up. Makes it look like the deck's been mixed up a little bit by a few cuts, but that's not enough. So I then go into a false riffle shuffle. So this is the push through shuffle. I have a few notes on this and I'll go through it while I'm explaining. So I go this, that's the false running cut. I then split the deck into 2 halves. In the same way that I do this, I take the bottom packet with the right hand, but I pull it directly to the side. So I need 2 halves. So I try and cut it halfway. So I've now got 2 halves. I let this packet riffle inside this packet. So both packets are doing this. And I'm letting them interweave at the back corner here. And then pushing them together. It's very important that this packet goes inside this packet. And what I mean by that is I have to let this packet dribble first, and then this dribble starts. And I have to let this packet finish last. And it'll make more sense when I do this now. First, riffle, last. Now when I say this packet is inside this packet, you can see that it's getting pushed inside, on top, and on the bottom. So once again, it looks like this. So that's the first part. The cards are pushed together slightly. Now, this can be quite difficult to learn, but I'm going to try and explain it as easily as possible. So it breaks, this packet goes inside, the cards get pushed together. Now if you look where finger 3 is on each hand, it is at the outside of each packet, right at the top corner. Now that is how these packets are getting pushed together. And as they push, finger 2 stays at the front, keeping the packets in order, and finger 1 stays on top. And as finger 3 pushes those packets right at the corner, because you're pushing at this corner, both packets are forced to pivot. Now the thumbs are at the back here, And when those cards pivot, when each packet pivots, this happens at the back. And each corner connects with thumb at the back here. You can see the opposite packet touches the opposite thumb just here. As soon as that happens, what I do is this. I move the thumbs away around the outside and connect with the edges here. Connect on the opposite packet. I then continue pushing with finger 3. Fingers 1 and 2 kind of move out of the way to allow this to happen. And you can see exactly what's happened. Those packets have pushed right through each other. And finger 3 is still pushing at this moment. Everything's coming from finger 3. But as soon as they've passed the packets, the thumbs at the back and finger 2 at the front square those packets up. Now at this moment you can see this was the original left packet and the right packet is now over here. And this here, this discrepancy of these packets now being separate, it's all hidden in the right hand. Also, if you look at the front of the left side of this packet, that's also hidden by the left hand. So all discrepancies are covered by the natural actions of each hand. So I'll do that again. Separation, riffled together, pushed in, finger 3 continues to push as the thumbs move to the opposite packet. As this happens, they pass each other. The thumb squeezes and finger 2 squares up the deck on each hand. And you're left with this brief. This is where you pull this packet out. This packet needs to go back on top of the deck. So at this point, because this packet's already there, all you have to do is grip the deck on this side right at the ends, and then here right at the ends, right on each packet. So essentially all you've got to do is pull the packets apart, this packet goes back on top, and the deck is still in order. This is going to take a bit of practice to get right, but here it is once again. The cards riffle inside. I push them through. I'm doing this slowly so you can see. Finger 3 pushes, and the thumb connects with the opposite packet at the back and then squares up. So essentially the left packet is going inside the right, traveling all the way through, and then you square up so that you're left with this. Now, you don't have to try and close this. You don't have to make it here. It doesn't really matter if it's over here, as long as it's covered up from the front or any exposed angles. You've got to make sure that this side and this side are covered up so that all that everybody can see is the top. But you don't have to hide this for too long. Once you get to this position, you're going to pause for a second here, and then you're going to strip this packet out and put it on top. Now, when you strip that packet out, it needs to look like it's just another running cut. So that's why I do the running cut in the first place. I do 1, 2, 3, so that everybody watching this, or everybody who I'm doing this for, gets used to seeing this, this, and this. So now when this riffles inside, goes through, to strip this out cleanly, I do it just like it's a running cut. And as far as everybody's concerned who sees it, they see a running cut, or they see a packet being stripped from the bottom to the top. So there's a running cut, cards get riffled, pushed through like this. This packet gets pulled out and placed back on top. The deck is now in order. But what I like to do, so it's not just one cut on its own, I like to follow that up with another series of running cuts. So I do 3 more running cuts. So I do 1, 2, 3. Then I do the push through shuffle. At this point, I pause and riffle up the back. I do the strip out, but I turn it into a running cut by letting it drop and now doing a running cut. So once again, I go from here all the way through here and then straight into a running cut, just so that it hides that strip out part of the shuffle. I don't want people to be suspicious of one cut after I've riffled, because to me that kind of gives away the push through shuffle. And the main problem with the push through shuffle for me is the player's urgency to separate those 2 packets. And I don't think there is an urgency. I don't think there needs to be one. Because as far as anyone's concerned who's watching, you're just doing a standard shuffle. And I'll expose to you, I'll show you what I think's wrong with this shuffle. At this point, most people do this. They pull it straight out with no pauses. See, in the spectator's mind, once you've riffled those cards together, Once they've riffled together and pushed together, that's the end of the shuffle. So why would you go straight into another cut? So I like to pause there, riffle up the back, and then do the strip. And one strip on its own looks kind of suspicious, or at least it would to me. So once I've done that strip, I just turn it into another series of running cuts. So there's a strip, and that gets disguised by being followed up by the same running cut that you started with. People are used to seeing you do this anyway from the beginning. You do one interweave, looks like a real shuffle, and then you turn that strip into what looks like a series of cuts, but you're just hiding it in the running cut, and the deck stays in complete deck order. Now, knowing this and getting used to this and learning this, if you want to control 4 cards at the top, 4 cards at the bottom, you can still do the same kind of complete deck control. Otherwise, with the running cut, obviously that controls the bottom cards and it controls the top cards, as does the push through shuffle. So all the moves that teach those kind of controlling slugs, I always avoided, because I could do a complete false deck shuffle. So I never found a good reason to just control a certain amount of cards if I could control all the cards. So that is my series of false shuffles. This is the coat shuffle. So this is the coat shuffle. It's a false shuffle, keeps the deck in the order it was in to begin with, retains every single playing card. And it's my kind of take on the Herb Zarrow false shuffle. And I came up with this a long time ago as a way of trying to find a way around a table riffle shuffle. And this is what I came up with. And it's not something that I ever took to a card table. But it's something that definitely deceives the eye. And there's one thing about it that kind of does that for me. And I'll show you what that is now. So what's happening is I'm holding the deck from either end, and finger 1 of the left hand is adding pressure to the top card. And I'm taking the top half with the right hand to the right side. But because of that pressure of finger 1 of the left hand, the top card stays where it is. So this happens. This packet comes to the side, the top card stays where it is. So there's now 1 card out of place. This packet's in order, this packet isn't in order, because there's this card out of place. That's the only discrepancy, the top card. So I pull the top half away, but keep the top card behind, like this. Just like this. Now, when I riffle the cards together like this, I'm not actually riffling this packet. I'm just lifting up the top playing card like this. And lifting it up at the back to look like I'm lifting the packet just like this. And I angle this purposely like this, so that when you see this, and then you see this, in your mind sees the same thing over here. Even though it's just 1 card, it sees the same thing because it sees it here. It's an optical illusion. And I'll riffle all of these cards into this gap, into the gap at the back. I'll expose this like this. I riffle them all in there. With this hand, if you notice when you're riffling, the thumb's moving upwards, and there's also kind of a juddering. There's almost like a little jerk going on each little card. It's like 1, 2, 3, and there's a little vibration. So I kind of try and mimic that with the top card. I let it go up slowly, and I also shake my thumb like this, so it looks like cards are falling from it. Now, because this is the only card out of place, I need to get it back on top of the deck. But I don't put it back on top of the deck because I want this shuffle to look real. So at this point, all these cards riffle inside apart from the top one. I keep the top one, and as soon as I get to the top one, I let this one fall inside, and then I let this one drop. So there's the situation right now. If I move those 2 cards away, we've got this half back where it needs to be. this card is there and this card is there. So this is the only card that's kind of looks out of place or feels out of place. So once again, everything riffles, but that goes underneath the top card of the right packet. I now then move the right packet forward to cover up the discrepancy. As I move it forward, I push it in like this as if I'm squaring the cards up. What this does is puts two cards out of place. The top two cards are now backwards. But to fix this, it's a very simple thing. I just repeat the shuffle again. Because when I take the top half away and keep this behind, I'm now keeping the second from top card behind, which is the queen, keeping that behind and doing the exact same thing. And the queen's going back exactly where it needs to be underneath the top card. And once I square up, we're back in complete order that we were in to start with. And we have retained every single playing card. So once again, a bit more speed, but exposed. The top card was kept over here, the king. These cards are riffled inside. And I lose this card under the top packet, under the top card of this packet. And they get pushed together. I do it again. I do it again. And now the deck is completely restored to its original order. Now, at this point, you need to do this quite fast, but don't speed it. As long as it's kind of done not slowly. I mean, I'm trying to say don't do this too fast. Don't think that you have to rush, because the eyes are going to follow this packet, because it's this packet that's been taken away. So they're not going to be looking at this, they're going to follow the hand. So they won't see this card. So when you pull to this side, all the attention's over here because this is moving. They can see more of this than they can of this. All you can see on this is the front and the top card curling. So the cards go inside, the card gets lost. At this point, I push this forward to hide the big gap and to make it look from the front like it's a full deck being shuffled, especially when you see this card get pushed inside here. Do the same thing again, and even if you do it from the side without pushing those two cards forward, it's those two cards getting mixed up on top that kind of sell it for me. And that is the coat shuffle.